What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Trippe. Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Live podcast, where we interview the very best real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and business leaders all throughout the country. And today is no different. We have my good friend, Mr. Mike Pulley, on the show. How's it going today, Mike?
Pretty good. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing well. Before we dig into this episode, guys, first of all, we're going to be talking to the renovations aficionado. So I'm excited to talk about renovations and how to flip a property, how to maximize profit out of our flips. But before we do that, guys, if you've ever gotten any value out of any video, any podcast we've ever done, hit that like button right now. Just pause everything, hit like, hit subscribe. I know most of you are already subscribed. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We really do appreciate that here. So, Mike, let's dig right on in. I don't like to go through a lot of fluff. I want to really dig right on in. You were kind of telling me a little bit of a story before we got on air about someone kind of dubbed you one day. You were doing so well at flips. Someone dubbed you the renovations aficionado. What does it take in a nutshell? And we'll really dig into it here on this show. But what does it take to be great at flipping houses?
You know, Brian, it's you hear that term or that terminology that, a professional becomes a professional after so many hours, right? After, I think it's 10,000 hours, something like that. So we can, in today's world, the amazing part is anybody who's getting into real estate can significantly cut that curve, right? And what I mean by that is there's a lot of amazing education out there. There's a lot of podcasts like this that give people an opportunity and insight into the things that people have accomplished, really head off a lot of the pitfalls too. There's resources connecting. For me, I was fortunate to grow up in the industry. So my dad's a real estate broker. So I grew up around a lot of investors. So I had a lot of mentorship growing up. So that's key, right? So networking, mentorship, diving into the education. I think too many people watch, HGTV and think, hey, I can do this house in a weekend for $5,000. Right. And, it really just takes that time and that effort to put into it. And if you're dedicated, you can make it work. And so for me, it's, becoming the best at it. It's you get a chance to walk through as many houses as we do. You get a understanding of what actually needs to be done on houses, right? I actually had a partner that I walked through on a house, and they kind of made fun of me because I just go out of my own space, and like people start talking to me and I don't even pay attention. I'm just in the zone, and how I interact and everything after that is, she was just like, hey, you remind me of Christopher Walken. So we always joked that I had my Walken moments when I go into the houses. Don't talk to me. Let me walk through it. Within like 10, 15 minutes, I could have an entire budget and scope of work, and be able to, by the time we finish the project, be within 5% plus or minus of the total of what I walked through initially. So it comes by a lot of experience, but also cutting that curve too, by surrounding yourself with people that are doing amazing things in the world.
And with that experience, I'm sure there's been a lot of failure. there's flipping houses is, you mentioned HGTV, where they make it seem like it's the easiest thing in the world. But to me, it's on the short list of things I don't want to ever do again. Property management is probably number one. And flipping houses is probably number two of the things I just will not do in real estate ever again. And it's just hard. It's harder. Flipping houses for sure is so much harder than what it seems like it is. And it's because of this piece right here. So I really want to talk about this, the renovations part of flipping a house. And we can talk about analyzing the deal. Did you buy it right? How to sell it? How to, I want to really dig into, what do you do to a particular house to maximize that value? And to me, Mike, it always starts with a contractor or a builder that you have to hire. I'm sure and every state's going to be different, but I'm sure you probably have a home builder's license. That makes it easy for you.
We actually, this year, got super tired of chasing around a lot of contractors. Everybody's incredibly busy. It's just the way the market is. There's not enough manpower. And so in August, I was on a vacation for the first time in like 8 years or 9 years with my wife that wasn't business or family related. And so came back from that rejuvenated, ready to go, and made the determination we're going to bring it in house, bring everything in house. Now, that's not the case for everybody, right? They don't have that skill set, they don't have that knowledge. But yeah, having a trusted partner as a contractor is key, right?
Yeah.
And I think too many investors jump in and they're like, I want to find an investor friendly contractor. Well, when, me as a contractor, when I hear that, I'm like, you want somebody to rake over the coals, right? And I actually built a construction estimating software, sold it nationwide. And so in my dealings with contractors nationwide and a relationship we had with BMO Harris, back then, we did a lot of statistical studies of contractors. Why do they leave? Why did things go sideways? And it turns out at the end of the day, contractors are just not that great at running a business.
Right.
And so the average contractor was netting 2% profit every year. Right. So
unknowing to them.
Yeah. They don't know their books. They don't know where things are. They don't, they're always getting that next check to cover the next thing, and, playing the catch up game. And so, finding a contractor who, you don't really want to get those ones. I mean, it's unfortunate, but really before we made the shift, we were looking at class B or C contractors, meaning they're really good at work, but they really suck at their business. But what we did was we really implemented the ability to come in and pretty much take over their job, right? We would provide them the budget, we would provide them the scope of work, we would provide them the timelines, we'd give them a draw schedule. They had to meet all of our requirements, minimum insurance requirements. They'd have to have their workman's comp if they had employees. So, there's a lot of checks and balances for an investor who, these are all things a lot of investors don't think of. They just think, oh, I found a contractor.
Yep.
I'm good to go.
Yep.
Right. But it's really paramount for you to understand, like, hey, check their references, go to their past job sites, like actually inspect their work. Because what looks good in a photo, I mean, as well as I do. I mean, we see it all the time. People who flip and then you get into their house and, you see the shoddy craftsmanship or, the massive amounts of caulking that they use instead of duct tape, because caulking, I figure, is, one of the wonder materials in the construction world. So do other people, but they overuse it. Right. So,
well, Mike, let's really talk about this, because I feel like this is where we can help a lot of people. You mentioned that a lot of folks, especially when they're newer, getting started, flipping a house, that they think that they can just hire a contractor and ta-da, the contractor is going to, magically make this thing happen. That is absolutely not the reality. And I think that right there alone, you can get your numbers perfect. But when you don't understand how to deal with a contractor and you think hiring any one of them is going to work, it's going to blow your budget up.
Right.
And probably you're gonna have to end up replacing that person, maybe chase them down, something like that. So let's really talk about this and give some advice to the person who out there who might have flipped a house or two, maybe he's never flipped a house and is thinking about flipping a house. And I did this reminds me of a show I did with, I'm sure Ryan Garcilaso. Yeah, we were all talking together.
Yep. Ryan is my coach. So
Ryan's your coach. So I did a show with Ryan a couple of years ago. I'll link it up. And the name of the show was Why Your Contractor Takes Advantage of You. Because when you go to somebody and you kind of admit that you're kind of a newer investor, you're going to get one of two contractors. One is the person the person you just described, doesn't know their business, and yeah, sure, I'm going to come in and help you. The other person is going to be the sophisticated contractor, and they're going to be licking their chops. Right. Because they got a brand new investor here that doesn't know what they're doing, and they're going to run the show and run all over you. So some tips, Mike, when picking out, choosing, interviewing a contractor. Some people right now are saying, and you alluded to this, I'm just trying to get whoever I can get right now.
Right.
So what are some tips that we can use to hiring a contractor?
Now, the biggest thing is, knowing your stuff, right? Like, even if you're new, you can still know your stuff, meaning there's a lot of tools and resources out there for you to learn how to properly present a package to a contractor. So in all the years we've been doing this, we've always put together and even with Ryan being our coach, he helps us on our construction coaching. And the joke is whenever we do a meeting, he's like, "Hey, Mike, you doing this?" And I was like, "Used to." Right. So the joke was I used to do these things and I used to have them implemented into my business, and bringing them back in place really is helpful. So, those things are, one, making sure that you interview the contractor, right? Making sure that you guys work well, that you jive well together. Because if there's any kind of awkwardness in conversation or anything like that from the get-go, it's going to make those hard conversations during the project even harder. Right. So that's one. Two is, go to some of their job sites, see how they work, right? A good contractor is going to have active projects going on, right? That was one of the biggest things. I did the fixer-upper business model for a decade, and that was the biggest thing that we did to get more clients or get clients to trust us was we walked them through our current job sites. We had anywhere between 12 to 17 job sites going at a time. So it gave, our new clients a chance to see our crews. It gave our clients a chance to see the kind of finishes that we do. It gave our clients a chance to actually meet the other owners too and ask questions. So same with as investors, going to their job sites, it gives you a chance to see what kind of finish they're doing, right? And hopefully they have various stages of projects going on to where you can see that. But see the finishes, see how they interact with their employees, right? And if the client or the homeowner is there, really talking with them, saying, "Hey, did they finish on time? Did they finish on budget? Were the guys jerks? Were they using the neighbor's water? Were they parking in the grass? Were they, no project is immune from any of that stuff. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. But if you can head that stuff off at the beginning and then give your, standard operating procedures to your contractor, that really sets the bar, right? So interviewing, create your own standard operating procedures. How do you want to have your job site ran? I want to make sure my job sites are clean, that they're professional to the neighbors, that they're not smoking in the job site. So those are some of the things that will help an investor become successful. And coming in with a timeline and a budget and a scope of work that is completely detailed, that doesn't leave gray areas, because that's where the problems happen. When there's a gray area, that's when things start to slide, right? So we've got a couple of projects right now that we've had to outsource just because of manpower, and we've been able to get some really awesome contractors because of these procedures, these standard operating procedures that we have in place. And just last, a couple of weeks ago, we had an issue. I walk in, and where the door is framed, you're going to walk right into the side of the vanity. And in fact, you won't even be able to, well, I guess you could open the door if we switch the door to swing out instead of in like it's supposed to. But, it's like, okay, why didn't we put the door in the middle? Right. And so, having those conversations, I'm like, hey, what's going on here? Another one, he measured the windows wrong on the exterior. 4 windows came in wrong. And I was like, look, man, it's like, you signed off saying the measurements were right. So you now own 4 windows. And so having those conversations is key and paramount, and having it all spelled out. Because if you don't have it spelled out at all, that's where things hit the fan. That's when the contractor starts to lose money, and then they get down to that 2% profit, and then their back's against the wall and they're like, I'm done. Peace out. I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah.
So
Mike, everything you're saying right now, dead on accurate. You know what you're talking about. You know what you're doing. Here's the problem. I know entrepreneurs. I know new house flippers. Everything you're saying right now, either one or two things is happening. Either someone's watching you and listening to you and saying and getting overwhelmed. I can't do that. I don't want to do that. That's overwhelming. They're either thinking that, or they're thinking, oh my gosh, to get all of that and to do all that, I'm going to be paying this contractor 20, 30% more than what I want to pay him. It's going to be one of those two camps.
Right.
So is that true?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, right? So, I mean, I even like that's a conversation I have with new investors, right? They're like, I want to get into fix and flips. And I joke, yeah, I'm like, don't do it. It's a scam, right? Because it's a tough business. I mean, it really is. It's very cash flow intensive.
Yes.
You have to have a lot of capital up front. Some of these hard money lenders like, oh, you only have to have 5 grand to get started. We've done enough projects to know you need a third in reserves of the project. So, if it's $100,000 project, you need $33,000 in change and in sitting in your bank account ready to go. Because, especially when it comes to your systems, so your HVAC, your plumbing, and your electrical, I mean, you're right out the gate, that could be 30, 40 grand, right? If you're replacing all those systems, if not more. So I think the key is, Brian, like for people to understand is you don't have to be overwhelmed, right? Like we have 18 projects going right now. And I feel a little overwhelmed today only because I was out of town last week for Thanksgiving. And then right before that, I was out of town with some friends. And so, I missed like a whole week of work, right? So here I am catching up to everything but we have 18 projects. And I say overwhelmed, I'm just like, I got to go check out the projects, troubleshoot a couple things, and then that's kind of it, right? So I am fortunate. I have a really awesome construction coordinator. So look at that. Like I have a really awesome GC, right? So she's handling the schedule. She's handling the material order. She's handling the payroll. She's handling all that stuff. So that's just like for an investor looking at like, okay, who's a trusted GC, right? That you can work with. So going back to like the concern, right? There's some people that are just going to run away and be like, hey, I didn't even see what you were talking about, right? Then there's the others that are going to be like, I see it, but it stresses me out, right? So the key is just having those things in place, because if you have those things in place, like for me with Christina, right? I have our standard operating procedures. I have our, like our budget set aside. We have our timelines. We have our material selections. We have everything done, right? So now it's just go. And, there's very little hiccups and hangups. Sort of, I mean, yesterday we did have one where we found some floor joists had slipped off the center beam. Pretty big deal. So, my foreman calls me. So it's just like my GC or his, lead person calling him saying, hey, we need to have a meeting. So going down there and figuring, okay, what's that going to take? Okay, we're adding another day of time for two guys, two skilled carpenters. How much is that per hour? How much is that in materials? And at the end of the day, it's like $600 to fix what could be a massive problem. Sure. So, just whenever you have those problems, making sure you address them, right? Because I think too many people like, oh, I didn't see it. It's not there. It's not there. It's not there. And then, it comes back and it bites them and it's still there. Right. And even after it bites them, the pain is there. And so I think the thing is for anybody new or even experienced, you have to have those rules set up in place first. If you've had Ryan on the show, I'd actually recommend, I know you said it's been 3 years, I would have him on again. Cause I mean, here's some of the other things that have changed in the market, right? We've now had COVID and, we have supply shortages. I had tile that's an in-stock tile for one of my distributors. I go to pick it up and they're like, yeah, we got like 5 pieces. I'm like, I need like 50. Right. And so, I had to call an audible, get a smaller tile, which was way more labor intensive, took more time. It was still the same price per square foot for the tile, but those little audibles that you have to call on the fly, those ones are manageable. But can you imagine if you don't have a kitchen that comes in, or you don't have flooring that's halfway comes in, and then maybe the other half is on a container somewhere in California, off the coast of California, and there's no expected timeline to get it in, or now when you do, maybe who knows, maybe they just ding you with some massive freight charges. And so, and then on top of that, you have municipalities. The biggest thing we've had this year, the biggest delay we've had this year is municipalities. I mean, just the lack of concern that they have for time efficiencies. And, we have one project that just hit the market almost 3 weeks ago. We bought it last December. And, we sat on it. It took us a month for the architect to finish, because we're doing an addition. And even if we were doing a renovation inside, it still would have taken a month because we would have had to get permits to redo the bathrooms, and we are going to add another bathroom on the first floor and all that. But even then, it would have been forever. And it took them 4 months to review our permits, right? And so 4 months to review, another month to issue it. So 5 months plus the architect 6 months. Here we were the end of July by the time we finally started. And then we had rain, so we couldn't even pour a foundation. We couldn't, we had rain for like a solid month, it felt like. So by, September, we were finally cranking on the dang thing. And it's like a 6-week project. So September to October, end of October. And then it hit the market the first part of November. First part of November. So, you just don't have control over these other outside factors, especially in this world of COVID. So, that's the biggest thing now is, okay, now we used to look at like, okay, what's our holding time for, this project? We used to look at it like for 6 months. Do the numbers pencil out at 6 months? Now we're like, we should really push it to a year, especially for something like that, where it should have only been a 6-week project. Now we're like, we're reevaluating everything because we have 4 other projects that are the same. The city has delayed them. We have another 6 that are starting that we were hoping to have permits by now. They've been in the permit office for 3 weeks. They're usually 2-hour turnaround. So, that's something else people need to consider. So I think sometimes it's going to be important for you to really assess, right? Like, is this maybe a better wholesale deal? Like, do I take it down and just clean it up and put it on the market? Which I think right now in today's market, you can, because there's such a shortage of property.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's just, for me, we're typically speaking to brand new investors or people who have just done a few deals. That's most of our audience. And right now, not trying to scare you, not trying to like convince you to not do this. You just have to understand what you're getting yourself into so you can put the right things in place before you get going. Let's move away from talking about contractors. I want to talk about actual doing the work of the renovation of the house. How do you know, Mike? You said you walk in and you can tell, get within 5% plus or minus of what the budget's going to be just based on experience, because you've been doing this for so long. What are some of these unknowns though? What are some of these things that we might that we should be looking out for that maybe the common investor, the newer investor, may not know to look out for? Walk into a house and I don't know that it needs a full, system update like you were just talking about. How do we know? What are some of the most common maybe unknowns or things that people commonly pass up?
The biggest thing is, and I've been there, I've made the mistake too, but it's looking at the systems, right? You can look at the system, and just because it has a newer date on it, the HVAC systems have in their serial number, it has the date. Usually it's at the very beginning or the very end you just have to look at the manufacturer and how they put their serial number together. But the biggest thing is walking into a project, making sure like, okay, let's look at the systems, right? What's the date on it? Typically HVAC systems, you could squeak out probably 20, 25 years. Water heaters, unfortunately now are 10 to 15 years. Your plumbing, if it's cast iron, that stuff really, especially if it's been vacant for a while, you really should look at replacing those, because just like in the winter, you lick your lips start to crack, right? So, you reintroduce water into a pipe that hasn't seen water in months or years, it will cause that pipe to crack eventually at some point or another. And we've seen it more often than not. And, so, or looking at galvanized lines, water lines instead of copper or, PEX. We've have some where it's CPVC lines. So like sprinkler lines, they use those for the water supply lines. Those over time become rigid and can crack or burst, especially if the house has been vacant. So the biggest components is, what are the MEPs? So mechanical, electrical, plumbing. What do those look like? And so, if you have a great relationship with a plumber or HVAC person, even electrician, it would be wise to take them with you on a project, especially if you've got it under contract. Just have them walk through and just say, hey, what do you think? You could always hire a home inspector too. That's always something that I recommend, especially for new inspectors. We don't do it so much now just because I know what I'm looking for, or my foreman knows what he's looking for when we walk a project. But for those that are new, a home inspector, I mean, look, $300 to $500 is the best insurance you can get to protect yourself from getting into a bad investment,
Mhm.
for any new investor,
Mhm.
right? And even the experienced ones, right? If you're not a contractor, as an investor, it's still wise to have somebody in your corner that you could just um, have walk through. Yesterday, we had a friend of ours. He's a home inspector, and he just did a walkthrough inspection for an investor that's buying one of our wholesale properties. And so, he wasn't doing a full on report and all that, but he was just like, okay, combing over the house. So when she got there, he could say, okay, here's this, here's this, here's this, which she, fortunately, she already saw those things when she did her first initial walkthrough before she put the contract in. And, we also knew those things in that too. So I think the biggest thing is for when you're looking at these properties, making sure you look at the MEPs. Um, there's always going to be variables that you don't understand that you won't see, like you won't know if there's termite damage behind a wall, dry rot, mold, all those things. You just don't know. I mean, you could do mold tests. Termites are a little bit harder to find if all the walls are closed up. Um, so there's those things which I typically tell people. I'm like, hey, you need to put in, if it's a home like that's within the last 70 years, typically you could get away with, like a 5% or 10% contingency. If it's a historical home,
Mhm.
or that's brick and all that, or even not, is if it's historic, if it's older than 70 years, we always budget it in the area of the side of 15% contingencies, because it's going to happen. You're going to open a wall, you're going to find something. And these houses were really well built, but they shift, they move, people don't take care of them, and they cost more money sometimes to fix.
Right.
So those are the things that I would say, as a new investor, look out for the MEPs, get an inspector if you can. It's the cheapest insurance you're going to get for yourself in the process.
So that's all good stuff. I want to talk about two finishes, like
Okay.
certain things, and it's obviously and I'm not a house flipper, so forgive me,
Yeah.
but I've lost money on some flips, but it's going to depend on price range too, how much you want to do certain things and how over. So I want to try to get Mike. I want to try to maximize as much profit as I can out of this flip. And I know you're in St. Louis, and
Okay.
you're primarily flipping in St. Louis. So I think people need to understand that a Midwest market, where you are. Give us kind of like some price points of kind of retail value of some houses that you've done, and what you would recommend at different price points for, I don't know, granite. Do you put granite, or do you put kind of countertops like that in everything, or is it just certain high end stuff? And what about any other potential finishes that you would do at maybe a $500,000 house versus a 250, in Birmingham where I am, 250 is kind of like the median. That's like kind of the average house here. I'm sure
Right.
it's similar probably in most of
Pretty
the
similar.
southeast.
Yeah, we're at like 225 to 250 is our
Yeah,
median.
so we're somewhere around in there too. So is there something different that we would do for that house versus maybe a starter home like 150,000, or versus a $500,000 home? What are some things that we should for sure do or for sure not do? I think it's going to be market specific probably, but what
Right.
are just some things that you guys do and you're seeing to maximize that profit?
So because we have so many projects going, we've actually just fallen in line with, three different types of finishes, right? So three different lighting packages, three different flooring options, three different countertop options, three different cabinet options. So it allows us that flexibility to rotate through the projects, but it also gives us some diversity in them as well, right? So it gives us that diversity, but it gives us that ability to, if we have something left over from one project, we can shift it to the next project. So that helps save costs there. Uh, but yeah, every price point is different, right? So for us, I mean, most of our low, anything kind of sub 250, we're doing a lot of like vinyl plank floors
Mhm.
because they do really well.
All
They
throughout?
Yeah, I mean, even sometimes in the bathrooms too. It just depends on what we got going on and the levels of finishes. The not levels of finishes, but the floor levels too, and
Yeah.
how much thresholds we want to have and transition points. And um, so for the most part, we're doing that there. When we get above that, we're looking at like a solid floor, solid hardwoods. We don't do carpet hardly ever. If we do, we might throw it in a closet or something like that. Go pick up a remnant. We got one guy on our team. He's a floor layer. He's done carpet. So he can knock it out in like 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we just don't do carpet because we don't think it wears well. We don't think it looks nice. I, especially on the flips, it doesn't command as high of a price. And quite frankly, carpet now is as expensive as the vinyl plank floors. I mean, for an actual decent vinyl plank floor. I mean, you're finding some vinyl plank floors you can get for $2.50, $3 a square foot. Carpet's going for about that.
Mm.
I mean, if you go for the 99-cent route, carpet, it's going to show. People are going to feel it, even if you put a nicer pad in there. So, the thing that we do to make ourselves stand apart is kind of like the jewelry of the things, right? So maybe we'll spend a little bit more on a certain light fixture as an accent piece, or a little bit more, get a little bit more of a pattern or design for the backsplash. So those extra pops, or even in the shower, do maybe one wall like we did last year. It was a happy accident. We didn't have enough tile because of COVID. All the tile was gone. It was somewhere in a boat in the ocean, and we weren't going to see it anytime soon. But we only had enough, and they had already put up two walls. The back wall, and the back wall, and then the back wall here. Then there's the wet wall on this side, and we're like, what are we gonna do? So we got this really cool mosaic and put it down that side, and it went down, and it actually looked really good. It just popped. It sold so fast. We had that thing on the market, and it was like 2 hours before it was under contract, and it went for 20 grand above. We didn't expect that. It went for 20 grand above what we listed it for, which was 10 grand more than what it appraised for when we bought it to flip it. So because our lender put an appraisal on it. So just those extra pops that really make it stand out. And even doorknobs, right? People look at doorknobs, they're like, okay, you got 17 doorknobs in a house. Well, there's this basic one for 25 bucks a doorknob. But if you just do this extra, spend this extra couple $100 over here, spend $5 more per doorknob, and just make it stand out. Those are those little things that we do to make things stand out. People are like, oh, this is unique. I haven't seen this, or this is not your generic flip. And I think we're seeing a lot of that shift too. I think a lot of investors become savvy to that, to know that people want some really cool, sexy, sleek designs, and make it their own in their own way.
And a lot of what I'm about to ask you is, I feel like is going to be market specific, possibly, but I would love to kind of understand more about design, because there's a lot of design elements that really come into making something pop too. You have to kind of know what you're. It's not just go in there and just blow through it and just do a flip. There
Right.
are some specific things that you need to pay attention to. Just real kind of quick hitter questions. Do you guys paint every exterior?
No, no, we don't. Because for the most part, we got a lot of our houses are brick, and so
Do you
uh,
paint brick where you guys are?
we do. Yeah, this is an old exterior wall. We're in
Mhm.
my house. We're in a addition and
Mhm.
on mine, and quite frankly, this looked better than the really nasty brick it was, and it was the same on the outside, obviously. So we painted the outside of our house, and it looks amazing. So I think depending on the brick, you can really dress up a house. We've got 3 projects right now where I'm like, I would never, ever, ever touch the brick, right? Just because it is so beautiful. But then I have other ones. I'm like, oh yeah, we should paint that.
There's some
So,
people that paint every house and every
right,
brick, no matter what. So what colors are you guys using right now to paint exteriors? Is it just kind of one thing and you've always done it, or are you starting to change?
that's where we get a bit liberal too at times. For the most part, all of our wall colors and our ceiling colors. We do our walls and our ceilings the same color. We've been doing our trim darker. It's been, it's gotten a lot more people's attention to do that.
Darker as in.
Um, uh, we've one of the colors that we recently did. It is called iron ore. So it's almost like a blackish gray, and it's dark. I mean, it's really dark. If you go onto Sherwin-Williams website and look up iron ore, and with the contrast to the white that we do, it looks absolutely amazing. And exteriors, really depends on the style of the house, because every house lends its own different color. I mean, you could always go white. That's a good safe route, and trim it out with black, or with a few other colors. You usually want at least 3 colors, if not 4 colors, on the exterior of a house. It's just kind of the right design rule of thumb. Too many people like black and white, and there's no pop. There's nothing there. It's just kind of like, all right, you roll up on the house.
Where would you put the third color? On the shutters or
on the shutters, on the
door?
door, on the trim, on the the gutters. There's so many different places. Again, it just depends on the house. Every house lends itself. Every house has, some houses might have a basic trim, some might have a really ornate detailed trim. Like we've got a lot of historical districts here in St. Louis where it's at definitely 3 colors, but almost always 4 colors.
So your base kind of bread and butter, or what most people are just, you said safe, is white exterior.
That's the safe route. Yeah.
So what are people doing, and what have you guys been doing of late that's not safe, that you're seeing success with from an exterior paint color standpoint?
We haven't done a bunch this year, but I'll tell you, I had a friend who did like probably the very similar to the iron ore. I was like, wow, you're brave to paint the whole house that. And it turned out, when they trimmed it out and everything too, I was like, okay, that looks really good. It looks real sharp.
Did it sell well? Do you know?
It did. Then there's ones, for those that follow me on Instagram, I actually posted it a couple weeks ago. I mean, it is, see that rally together sign right behind you?
Yes, the red.
They painted their brick brighter than that with gloss. And then the bottom part was gray. So like the foundation part, they painted probably gray close to this.
So the house was bright red. Is that what
bright red and gloss? And gloss. Yeah, we don't usually go above a satin. I mean, we've done on the trim, we'll do like a semi-gloss on the exterior, but we don't usually go above a satin, because then the house looks weird and shiny. Right. So yeah, we painted siding before. Sherwin-Williams has a really good line that you can paint vinyl siding. You can paint aluminum siding all day. There's some paint out there you can paint windows. I haven't really found success with it. Typically peels off after the first year. So yeah, it's just, I would say, look at the market, look at what's around. I mean, when we did this house, we were actually going to do white. And I kid you not, right as we were working on the house, the neighbor across the street painted their house white. And then my buddy has 10 houses down. He painted his white that he was doing as a flip. So I was like, all right, we got to do something different. So we came up with this gray, and we loved it.
That gray is the exterior as well?
It is as well, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Mike, before we go, any last maybe tips, renovation tips for the newer or kind of beginner or intermediate house flipper out there, renovation tips that you could give folks?
Well, there's the saying, right? You make your house on you make your money on the buy. And too many people, especially new investors, they will try and force the numbers on the renovations to work, to get them caught up on something that they overbought, or they'll over improve the house. Right. So there's those 2 factors that come into play when, managing a project. And I will say, I am notorious for like, a couple of years ago, we started diving into smaller projects. This one included, our personal house included, it was a flip, and we overdid it just a little bit by like 15 grand. But we also did that knowing that we were moving into it. But looking back, I'm like, man, where'd that 15 grand go? I'm looking around like, because I think we could have had almost the same results without spending that extra 15 grand.
Real quick, last question for you on that point. How do you not talk about kind of overdoing a flip? How do we not do that? Is that just going and looking at houses nearby and seeing what they did and sold for? Is that a good tip, or what are some things?
Definitely. Yeah, I
should
mean,
do or not
definitely
do?
look at that. I mean, here's the thing is like sometimes, it's at the beginning of the year, we did a project in a is it okay area. It was like $120,000 house, right? And here I am, I'm like worried about like this, and this. And my project manager is just like, dude, he goes, pulls me over to the window on the side of the house. And we were raised up above all these other houses. He's like, what do you see out there? I'm like, houses? He goes, what kind of houses? I'm like, little houses. He's like, why are you trying to do like a $350,000 renovation in this $120,000 house? Right. Like, meaning why, like granite, for instance, he's like, why are you getting custom granite? He goes, we can go to Floor and Decor and grab a prefabricated slab, cut a hole in the sink and just drop in a sink for $500 versus getting a granite custom made for like $1,200-$1,500, right? I think too many people like, I want this finish, I want to make this, I want the, what do you call it, the brushed brass look, right? Well, there's a premium with the brushed brass look, right? You talk about 3-4 faucets, $100 more, there's $400, right? And if you do that on everything, like I say, we do that on like our tile, right? We'll do it on a tile or maybe doorknobs. But when you do that for $500 to $1,000 on every single line item in a house, here you are 10 grand later, 15 grand later, and you just
You'll never get it back out of the property.
You'll never get it back out, right? And I've had a few of those where I have over improved them, and then two of them taught me a big lesson, meaning somebody broke in and stole stuff. So now my $25,000 budget I turned into a $35,000 budget is now a $42,000 budget after I replaced the HVAC, because it was of course $7,000 to replace the HVAC, but my insurance deductible is $7,500. So I'm like, I can't make a claim on it. So, it's stuff like that where it's like, okay, you could blow your budget so fast.
Right. Well, Mike, you mentioned your Instagram handle earlier. Where can people go and find you and learn more about you?
So it's Instagram /home by design. So BUY, like you're buying a house. So it's Instagram.com/home by design.
Home by design, but by is BUY. Home
like
BUY design.
Yep.
It's Mike Pulley. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us an education on renovations. We appreciate that, man.
Hopefully we didn't scare too many people off. It's awesome. It really is. You just have to go into it with a game plan.
Yeah. And take a lot of this advice Mike gave us. I'll link up that other show that I did with Ryan, who also taught us a lot about renovations as well. Guys, make sure you watch these videos and really learn from the experts that have been doing this. And Mike said it earlier at the beginning of the show. It comes with experience. You can't be, an expert overnight. You have to really kind of dig in. And, I've heard some people even say partner with folks in the beginning.
Right.
If you break even in the beginning on your first one, that's a win because you've learned so much. That's a free education right there. So all these things, don't take what Mike's telling you lightly. Really take some of this advice. Thank you again, Mike. Appreciate you, sir. Guys, we love you. We're going to see you on the next one. And I hope you hit that subscribe button and you like our video. Love you. See you next time.